Okay, good morning, everyone. We're about to get started.
CNBC or?
CNBC. Well, probably CNN.
Fox. That's the only one everybody watches, so.
I've never watched it, but it's like,
I think
even right at Fox,
I think it's SNBC like it is.
I think they will.
I really believe they might.
Well, they are actively selling it.
You gotta wonder who would buy.
Elon.
Okay, good morning, everybody. We are ready to get started.
Okay, let's call to order. Call to order the finance, is this on?
Yes, you're on.
Okay, call to order the Finance Committee meeting of December 6th. And we, Richard Bengali, we've got here over from PFM, and Leanne, and all of us. Let's go around, introduce ourselves, and then we'll get going.
Okay, and
Starting
just
with
to
you,
let-
Bill, starting with Bill.
just to let you know, we do have new microphones. So when you press the button, there's a little red ring around at the top. That's how you know you're on. So if you push the button
Oh,
on,
this
the-
up here.
and you know you're on. Yep, you're on,
The
Mr.
ring
Moore.
here.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
It's not
I'm
easy to say.
Okay, I'm on real time. Okay, Bill Moore, a citizen member of the Finance Committee.
Doug Draper with Bank of America.
I'm sorry.
George Elmore, a member of the committee.
Jack Warner, still the second newest member of the committee.
Michael Koner, Finance Committee.
Paul Dumars, Finance Committee.
Patricia Morales, Office of General Counsel.
Frank Leto, JP Morgan.
Mike Baldwin, Jeffries.
Ron Haran, Treasury Department.
Rick Patterson, Raymond James and Associates.
Kristen Yaki, Treasury Department.
Christy Price, Treasury Department.
Heather Frederick, Chief Financial Officer.
Leanne Evans, treasurer.
Richard Pingelli, PFM, Asset Management.
Well, there are a couple new faces that I see over here to my right, the Christians and the Christie.
Yep, and I'll go ahead, and Christy Price is the manager in my office working on investments and debt, so you'll be seeing her at all the meetings. She actually prepared the annual investment report and annual debt report, so at some point, I'm going to get her talking at the meetings, but I promised her not today. And Kristen Yaki is also in my office, and she does the quarterly investment reports, so she helped compile data as well. And Ron Haran, he used to do a lot of the debt, but now he's doing just the capital budget and still helping with debt. So we got a couple people from my office, and Brenda Giampetti is in the back, and she's the one that makes sure you have badges. So everybody I know came in and got their badges okay. If you run into a problem with that, Brenda is the person that can take care of that for you. So yeah, we have a couple more people from my office today.
Yes, we do. Do you have a Santa hat as well as your jacket? All right, well, welcome, everybody. Not a lot of new faces, though. This group has been pretty steady for many years and done a great job.
Yes.
Appreciate that. So, Leanne, go ahead. We've got our
Okay, so
public comments, I guess.
Yeah, are there any public comments?
Was there any public?
I don't think so. So I think we can move on. We do have the agenda that we need to approve the agenda and the minutes first.
Okay.
So the agenda, just to summarize for the group, we'll be going through the annual debt and investment reports, the quarterly investment reports. I have a change that I want to make to the investment policy that we'll review. The financial advisor and investment advisor contracts have been negotiated. I'll give you an update on those. And then just to let you know, we do have some other contracts coming up, and I wanted to make sure you're aware of those. And that would cover the meeting for the day. We'll just go through each one of those.
Good enough. So the first is approval of the agenda.
Right?
Your motion?
To approve?
Second? All in favor? Agenda is approved. The minutes of August 9, we have them. I guess you have a pile. Everybody should have a pile of documents. This is a little different.
The minutes is the second document.
It's the second document there. If you've had an opportunity to read it, well, you're probably one of a few.
Move approval.
Move approval. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Then we're up to your items.
Okay, so I have the annual debt report, and I wanted to let the group, everybody know, Laura Howe is online. The hotels are pretty full in Palm Beach County, and she was looking for rooms, and it came up at $5,000 a night, and I told her she could attend virtually today. She wanted to be here. She will be here as we work through the underwriter selection process
Really?
next month.
$5,000 per night?
Yeah, I think, yep, we've heard it from a couple people, so there's some, yeah, there's some expensive hotel rates right now. So I appreciate the people that came here from out of town, that were able to find good hotel rooms or drove in this morning.
I got a couple extra bedrooms.
Give us your address, Bill.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the annual debt report pretty quickly. You all have seen this. We do this every year. It's as of June 30th, so it's not new news. But the two annual reports will go to the school board at the December school board meeting. And your respective board members could contact you and ask you questions on it. So I want to make sure you had it. That's why we printed hard copies. So in case it comes up and you need to have a copy, you have a hard copy. And that's what most of your package is the annual reports. They are pretty lengthy. The annual debt report really was created based on policy, but we've added to it over the years because I consistently would get questions on why did we issue debt? Why do we have so much debt service payments? What did we do with it? So this really tells the story of why we issued debt, what's still outstanding, what we did with the money. And right at the first page, we give credit to this finance committee for the work that we've done. So since the finance committee came into being, which was in 2001, we've done 91 transactions totaling $8.5 billion, and at present value savings in excess of $175 million. And that's something to definitely be very proud of, and I commend the finance committee. We would never have been able to do a lot of the transactions we've done over the years without the review of this committee. And I know this, the school board certainly appreciates your expertise that you lend to us in these meetings.
Well, there were some tough times in there,
There was.
including the
We've had
swap,
some
when the
interesting
swaps
seasons.
were around, if you recall. Bill Moore, at that point in time, said, get out of the swaps by noon, if you recall. And you don't remember this?
My memory is fading.
Oh, well, it was memorable because you got us out. We heard from PFM that we were in these swaps. Everybody was having issues. We got out of them by
Well, we
8:30 or something like the bill.
I think that's the floor, that was the SBA, that was the investment pool.
That was the SBA investment pool.
Yep,
Money there.
Yes, then we got out of the swaps thereafter, but it was a trying time.
yep.
You were on top.
Okay, so what I wanted to focus on in the reports is just point out the things that are new in this report. It does go through why we built schools, what we did. There's a section in here that is a little, that I've added language on that is regarding charter schools. Back in 2017, they made some changes about sharing capital outlay millage, but in 2024, the legislature put in place that we are required to share the capital outlay millage on a per student basis. And there is you get to deduct the amount of debt service associated with debt issued prior to March 1, 2017. So we get to deduct that off the top and then share it on a per student basis. And that's being rolled in. It was 20% in FY '24, 40% this year. It'll be 60% and so on. By 2028, it'll be fully out there that we're sharing on a per student basis. And all the debt that was issued prior to 2017 will mature in 2032. So those numbers continue to rise. The amount of money we're giving to charters will continue to rise. When we get to 2032, the amount we're paying annually to charter schools is $70 million a year. Over the 12-year capital plan we have right now, we've estimated $747 million will be going to charter schools. So that's certainly something we're paying attention to. It's a little challenging because we don't know what enrollment's going to be and what the percentage of our revenues will be going to charters. So it's something we'll continue to monitor and update every time we do a capital plan. But that's really one of the key drivers as to why we needed to go out for the sales tax that was recently approved.
Do we follow and monitor the money that goes to the charter schools, how it's used?
That will be part of their audit, certainly, and the sales tax will also be shared with charter schools by statute. So the sales tax share will be reviewed by the Sales Tax Oversight Committee. And then for the regular capital outlay, they have to submit a plan of how they're going to use it. to make sure we have to verify that it's in compliance with statute. So that is a new section I wanted to brief you on that. And then the leases, the equipment leases, the final payment on those happened August 1st, 2024. So we used those to buy school buses and some air conditioning units over the years. They had a 5-year term for most of them. I think some were 3, but most were 5 years. So the final payment happened this past August. And then for the COPS, we did 2 COPS issues in FY '24. The first one was priced, I guess, on December 11th, so about this time last year. It was $140 million to finance some construction projects. So it had a coupon rate of 5%, a net interest cost of 4.24%. It will mature in 2040. So it's only a 16-year term. We have the ability to pay it back sooner. We're not issuing debt going out to 25 or 30 years. If we can avoid it, we're doing sooner. So that issue was completed in December. And we also did, on May 6th, we closed on the forward refunding. That was done with Bank of America. We locked in the rate in 2021. And it was for 2 debt issues. It was the 2012C and the 2014C, I believe. The 2014C refunding is what closed this past year. And we locked in the rate at 1.37%. So, who could have guessed that interest rates were going to rise as much as they did? So that was an amazing deal that we did. It locked in present value savings of 19.4% or $6.5 million between 2024 and 2031. So that's the 2 debt issues that were done in the last year.
Fantastic.
It was a really good transaction, and we announced that when it happened, but again, this is an annual summary. The other thing I'll mention, the Qualified School Construction Bond, or the QSCIB, that is going to be maturing on August 1st, 2025. So we have 1 more year of that. And everything else is pretty straightforward. The line of credit did close associated with the sales tax. That closed out in July of 2023, so that happened during this fiscal year. Our debt ratings have not changed. We have no swaps outstanding. They were all terminated in 2018. And at this point, we go through and have all the reports. This is I know it's hard to see here. I can make it a little bigger. It's probably easier to read on paper. This is the report that's actually required by the debt policy. And it's a list of all the outstanding transactions. It shows the original par, the principal outstanding as of June 30th, and we also have the principal outstanding for August 1st, because we make principal payments August 1st. I think it's important to show the amount that's currently outstanding when we issue the report. So you have both those numbers. Has final maturity, if it's fixed or variable, and right now everything we have is fixed rate. If it was issued as a new money transaction, or it was a refunding, the interest rates, any call provisions. I've got all kinds of comments in here, what it refunded, if it was for construction projects, if it was a taxable deal. So those are my notes of important things that I need to keep track of. If there's any exposure to market change, which there is none for these because they're all fixed rate. If it's a public offering or a private placement, and if there's any hedges, and we have no hedges. So this is the only one that was required in policy, and I use this all the time. These are truly management documents that we use. It's not something that's only updated once a year, but this is as of the data as of June 30th. Then we have a report that is the list of all the transactions really since the Finance Committee came into being. That's why I can put that number on the first page, because we are tracking it. It lists every individual debt issue, if it was new money or a refunding, if it was a swap, the transaction total, and the present value savings. And then I've just got a count so I can keep track of how many transactions they are. So it groups them all together, and it does have the grand total. There's the $8.5 billion of transactions that we've done, and then the present value savings. So that's the second report that's in here. And this third one, this is used by so many departments throughout the district. Legal, I try to make sure they have a copy of it. This is really a list of all the properties that are included in the master lease. So it's important to note that because if you have a school that we want to do an addition to, we need to see if it's already in the master lease. or if we want to put a cell tower on it, or if we're going to sell some property or grant an easement. It's good to have this list out there of all the schools and properties that are included in the master lease. So this gets updated annually. Includes the square footage, the student stations, how much is outstanding, how much is asset versus non-asset in the transaction. This report actually came into being at the request of Moody's years ago. A couple of you in the room may know John and Carvaya, who was with a rating analyst with Moody's for a long time. He actually gave me a template, build this. The rating agency wanted it, and it's become very helpful for us. And there's a lot of properties included in the master lease. And then we have the schematic, and PFM prepares this for us each year. And it's a schematic of all of our debt. So we can go in and look at each debt issue and see if it was refunded and track it over the years. So this is a graphic representation of all the outstanding debt. That's the last page of the report that you can fold out, because if it's not 11 by 17, you could not read it. So that concludes the annual debt report. This really is a report for the board and the public to see what we do. And again, it's really helpful information for staff to be able to manage the portfolio that we have.
Well, it's fantastic. It's a tremendous amount of debt that we've issued and retired.
Yes.
It's really
Yeah, one of the
quite
questions
an
that-
amount. So you're not growing, though, at the rate, any type of rate that was occurring early on in this.
I'm forgetting-
Is the school district growing in terms of numbers?
No,
of
no, well,
students?
I don't know if you want to chime in on that. The enrollment's relatively flat at this point. A lot of the construction projects we're doing are replacing schools that need to be replaced or adding some additions. Some of the additions happen because we built classroom additions, but never increased the size of the cafeteria and the office and the clinic and what we call the core areas. So we've had to go back and add some core space into schools. Otherwise, the students would start lunch at 9 o'clock in the morning and finish at 2, and then they go home at 2:45. So we've had to do a couple of those. And we do have a couple of new schools. There is growth out west. We've got a school under construction in the area where Arden is. There's another school planned for the Westlake community. So there is a lot of growth in pockets of the county.
That's out west for the most part, yeah.
Did you want to add anything to that, Ms. Frederick?
Well, I just wanted to add that, I mean, we are fortunate that we're not seeing declining enrollment at this point, so we are projecting that we are going to stay flat for next year. We did have a slight increase in enrollment this current year of about 300 students, and when you're looking at 170,000, that is pretty much just flat. But when you look at Broward and Dade and most of the districts, not only across the state of Florida, but nationally, they are facing declining enrollment. So I would say that we are fortunate to at least be holding and remaining consistent within our district-operated schools.
Is there
But
any
that may be a challenge going forward. and
Is
it's
there
something
any
we're-
comparison between the results that the school district achieves and the charter schools that it's funding?
Do you mean for are you saying?
Student achievement.
Student achievement. Well, one thing I will mention, it is difficult to do a comparison with the achievement. I mean, it differs so much. The original purpose of charter schools was really just, more mom and pop type operations, but as they continue to grow, I mean, they are now just large management companies that open the charter schools and operate the charter schools, so it's truly not much different than a district-operated schools in terms of achievement. And I can say, especially with the certified teachers, there is definitely a difference with the charter schools not having as many certified teachers as district-operated schools, and they're just not required to follow the same regulations that we are as a district. Our district is, like I said, fortunate that we're not seeing declining enrollment. Where we are seeing declining enrollment is in the charter schools.
So I guess what you're saying, or what I'm hearing, is that the academic qualifications of the faculty is different for the charter schools, not as high as the public school.
For many of them, and it is mixed. You have some charter schools that are very high achieving, and others that are not. So it is truly a mix when you look at our charter schools. We do have some high performing charter schools within our district.
Yeah, I expect.
Okay, are there any questions on the annual debt report?
Bravo.
Thank you. So if the committee could vote to accept that report?
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Bill?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. The annual investment report is the next one, and this is really the report as of June 30. So I'm going to highlight just really one item that I wanted to cover on here. When we looked at the total interest earnings, I think is it this page? It is. Total interest earnings for the year was $107 million, as compared to $71 million in FY '23. So, I mean, that's a credit to the interest rate changes. I'd love to take personal credit for that. Not going to do it, but that's where it is. So this report, it is basically the quarterly investment report that you all received back in June. So I'm not going to go through all this, but the first couple of pages is just a summary. It does go through what happened over the course of the year with interest rates. We do have cover that we have a lot of bank accounts, and we do actively manage to try to prevent fraud on the accounts. And we did have 360 attempts, 360 exceptions, and 118 items were returned as fraud over the course of the year. So that's really it for the investment report. Everything else is as of June 30th, so it's not current data. I don't really want to spend a lot of your time on it because you've seen it. I'd rather spend more of our time on the most recent quarter and turn that over in a moment. But I wanted to make sure you had a chance to see it. If you have any questions on the annual investment report, I'm happy to answer them or go through this in more detail.
What is our return again?
It was 107 million. We have different portfolios. The return on the core portfolio was 5.02%, which the benchmark was 4.53.
Nice going.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yep.
Good.
It's terrific. Any comment from the investment bankers?
Okay, so if you wouldn't mind voting to accept the annual investment report?
Your motion?
So moved.
Bill? George? Or Jack?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, and with that, we're going to go into the quarterly investment report. This would be as of September 30th. Do you want to take over the mouse? I'm going to turn it over to Richard Pengelly to give us a market update.
So, good morning, and, I wish we could take credit for that great result, but really it's the Fed and the actions of the Fed in response to the economy that, helped generate a lot of that. So we'll start off talking about the Fed. The Fed controls short-term rates. The district is largely a short-term investor, so we really focus on what the Fed is doing. And what I pulled up here is an overview of what we've seen in the cycle as the Fed has been, fighting inflation that rose to, in excess of 9%. They paused, and then in September of this year, finally began going in the other direction in the cycle and started tightening again and cutting interest rates. They led off with a 50 basis point cut in September. They started sort of, taking their victory lap about achieving a soft landing at the Jackson Hole meeting in August. When they cut 50 basis points in September, they, communicated that maybe if they'd had a little more data at their July meeting, they might have started then, which is why they did essentially 2 cuts at that September meeting rather than just starting off with 25 basis point. So they've created a course for themselves here, which would have them do basically 25 basis point cuts at the remaining meetings this year. They just did one in November following the election. They're likely to do the next one here in December. So, we show here, and this is data as of 9/30, a couple different things I want to highlight. One is we went back to the 80s and looked at it and said, well, what's the average pace of cutting, and what does this cycle look like compared to that? And they really had we're projecting to cut at a much faster rate than what they've done in an average tightening cycle to get back down to what they think or project to be sort of the neutral rate in the economy, which we'll talk about in a second here. You know, in September, the market thought that they would actually maybe go, you know, in line with what they're projecting. Early in the year, the market really thought that they would have to cut actually much faster. I think at the beginning of the year, the projection was that the economy is going to be much weaker as we get to the end of the year, and the Fed would have to cut significantly. That view changed as we got a lot of positive economic data in the beginning of the year, and then as we went into the summer, it was quite the opposite, where all of the data was much weaker than expected. Where we are now is that the futures curve is really thinking that it's going to be, you know, slower than this, especially post-election, and we'll touch on some of that as we go through here. So the labor market was one of those factors that supported the Fed, saying that conditions were weakening and that it was time for them to start cutting. If you go back into last year, the average growth in non-farm payrolls was something like 200 to 250,000 if you average out the month. So very, very strong, tight labor conditions that really weakened up in 2024, particularly in the summer. We showed here, the September reading was strong at 254,000. But subsequently, October was weak, and there was a lot of things that muddied that number, including a couple hurricanes and strikes. And the reading was 12,000 new jobs added. I just saw, a minute ago that it looks like this number has come back and sort of shows a bit of a correction. We're back to 220-something thousand, net new jobs being added. So if you look at the average of those, they're somewhere in that, 100 to 150,000 net new jobs being added range, which is what the Fed thinks is more of a balanced labor market and what they would expect out of the labor market. The unemployment rate, going into leading up to May of this year had been below 4%, indicating, again, very tight labor conditions. As I've mentioned before, you have to go all the way back to the 60s to find another period in time when you had 24 months, full 2 years, where the unemployment rate was below 4%. Since then, the unemployment rate has gone up to 4.3%, 4.2%. It's come back down to 4.1%. The reading today was again 4.2%, and this is about where the Fed has projected and expects the unemployment rate to stay. It indicates basically full employment in the economy. So taking overall, the labor market has cooled and is basically brought itself back in balance. At one point, we had, 2 job openings for every unemployed person who was looking for a job. Prior to the pandemic, the ratio was something like 1.1. It's now back down to, again, around that 1.1 range. Again, labor market is in balance at this point. So, the Fed has two mandates. One is full employment, and as we just talked about, the employment picture it looks to be in balance. The other is inflation, and inflation, high inflation was what caused the Fed really to rapidly increase interest rates. So inflation has come down. It still hasn't reached their target of 2%. The drivers of inflation coming out of the pandemic were largely goods related. It's since shifted into services. And then as the labor market has cooled, now what we see sustaining the inflation rate above the Fed's target are shelter costs. Housing market, housing costs, shelter costs continue to be the big driver of the inflation. We show here, you know, if you took the shelter component out, that the CPI number would be more like 1% inflation. So that CPI, the shelter component rather, is really a big component of what's driving the inflation levels.
What is that, shelter inflation?
So it's basically the cost of owning a home. They do a
Oh,
calculation.
that's what you mean by shelter.
Yes, yeah. That's the shelter
Home
component.
price. Okay.
So, and so that's really kept inflation sort of sticky when we look at core inflation levels, and we don't see an immediate relief to that number. So that's expected to remain the component that's likely to remain sticky for some period of time as the Fed tries to get the rate down to 2%. Now, there's a question of whether that really should be the target, and really if it should be something maybe higher than that.
How can you do that without increasing construction of new homes, et cetera?
Yeah, how do you do that? Right.
I don't see how that, is it manageable? How do you do it?
I don't know how you do that. Right. There's a supply problem. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Since the consumer represents, you know, 2/3 of our economy, the consumer has continued to hold up the economy, and so, you know, what is the conditions for the economy? So the misery index, very simple index that basically looks at the CPI rate, adds it to the unemployment rate, and is sort of reflective of the conditions of the consumer. You know, with a, let's say, 2% target and full employment being at 4%, you would expect that the index reading to be around 6 to 7 to indicate that the consumer is in a healthy position. You know, as of September and October, the reading was around 6.7 and has come down significantly from being closer to 15%. So the consumer, you know, continues to be doing well enough to keep on spending and driving the economy. We see that in GDP. The you know, reading for the second quarter was 3%. The third quarter reading, which this shows a projection, but the actual reading was 2.8%. Again, a very relatively strong number. You know, pre-pandemic, the GDP ranged in the 2 to 2.5% rate. So, you know, these, you know, 3% levels continue to indicate a strong economy. In terms of, you know, consumption expenditure for the consumer, we've come back to pre-pandemic levels and actually gone a little bit above that. Again, consumer continues to remain strong, but what we are seeing is the consumer is changing their buying pattern. They're shifting from, you know, higher or more well-off consumers are shifting and maybe buying at, you know, Walmart instead of Target. We are seeing some increases in the usage of debt, but again, not at alarming levels quite yet. So over the course of the quarter, interest rates declined as the market anticipated the rate cut and look forward to anticipating further rate cuts. We show the two-year declined 112 basis points over the course of the quarter, and that contributed to strong market value gains, which we'll show in a second when we look at the performance. We've since given some of that back since the election. Probably about half of that has given back as we've seen an increase in Treasury rates. This was the last Fed projection, which came out came out in September. We're expecting to get another one here at the next meeting in December. At that time, they projected that they would cut rates another 50 basis points this year, which they have continued on that path, and we expect another one in December. They indicated they'd cut interest rates another point next year, and then 50 basis points in 2026 to get down to where they thought the neutral rate is, which they were projecting at 2.9% at that time. You know, we think that it's probably, the new one that comes out will probably indicate a higher, you know, neutral rate, and maybe that longer-term rate is maybe more like 3.25 to 3.5 when we see the new numbers come out, or new projections come out in December. If you look at Fed funds futures for 2025, instead of that full point cut in next year, the expectation is maybe half of that, so 0.5% in 2025. All of that is good news for the district as a short-term investor, that we continue to enjoy these, you know, four-handle type rates a little bit longer. So this was the yield curve as it looked, you know, at the end of the quarter. You know, as I mentioned before, since then the you know, rates have come back. There's an expectation with the new administration coming in that you know, if you look at the policies on balance, they're likely to be more on the inflationary side, and that also there would be more more continued Treasury, you know, issuance. So we have seen rates actually come back from the levels that you've seen here. The yield curve has flattened out quite a bit. You know, with the 2-year at something like this morning, something like 4.16%. You see here it was at 3.60 at September 30. And the 10-year at a 4.18, 4.20, and here you see it was at a 3.76. Again, you know, as a short-term investor, all this is positive, you know, a positive direction for rates for the portfolio. The other thing I'll touch on before jumping into the actual portfolio is that you know, corporate spreads have tightened up. They tightened up over the course of the quarter, and since tightened even more. You know, we're kind of in a risk-on environment, so spreads are very narrow. What that means for us is we're very cautious in how we buy, you know, corporate credit in the portfolio, trying to keep maybe a little dry powder. We're at the lower end of our target allocation ranges for that, in anticipation that as we go into the next year and we start seeing more policies enacted in the, you know, from the administration, have a better sense of how they'll progress and affect different markets, we may see spreads widen out in you know, in the next year. Returns were great for the quarter, very strong. You know, Treasury return, you know, 2.87% in the 1 to 3 year area. 1-year returns, very, you know, we haven't seen these kind of returns in short-term fixed income in a while, ranging from, you know, 6.7% on Treasuries up to, you know, 8.2% on corporates. So very, very good returns for the year. I'll jump into the portfolio, looking at the long-term portfolio. The duration continues to be a little bit short of the benchmark duration, which is 1.76, and that's a function of the policy, which is not to sell securities at a loss. So as rates were rising, you know, securities essentially drifted in. You know, as we rebalance and restructure, you'll probably see that duration creep out a little bit. The downside was that in this past quarter, when rates dropped significantly, you underperformed, but you know, as rates have sort of bounced back and retraced a little bit, you outperformed a little bit. So so one is sort of evened out. One quarter will be evened out when we come back in the next quarter. Credit quality remains very high. Portfolio is predominantly invested in U.S. Treasuries and high-quality corporate credit. I mentioned that we did the corporate allocation is on the lower side of our target range for corporates. And returns for the portfolio, 2.57 versus 287 for the benchmark for the quarter, and 6.69% return for the year versus 6.74 for the benchmark. Again, long time since we've seen those kind of returns in a short-term fixed income portfolio. So I'll pause there for questions.
Should all take a breath, I think. Pretty darn good.
I actually have a question because I'm more curious than anything. If you go back a couple slides, did the de-weighting of federal agencies, is that kind of in anticipation of maybe things changing in this
No.
administration or anything?
No. In the pandemic, we saw more issuance from the agencies, and that increased the spreads. So since then, spreads have tightened up, and there's really not much relative value in buying the agencies compared to treasuries. So, yeah. Good question.
Bill?
Yes, if this were your money, not the school district's money, would you extend your duration, or would you bring it in? That's really, that's the only thing that really counts.
So that question we got, we've been getting a lot of this year, right?
Right.
Clearly, it's time to go out. Obviously, the Fed is going to keep cutting rates. Let's just go all out on duration. And we saw a big drop, 112 basis points. Well, we've retraced that, right? So there's still, our view has been to be more neutral to benchmarks, right, on duration, because there is still uncertainty, right? Risk hasn't completely disappeared. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. So we have a neutral stance.
You have not been extending them?
We've been neutral to benchmark, so we haven't overweighted versus where our benchmarks are.
Well, are you extending the maturities at all?
No, like I said, we're just neutral
just waiting.
to where our benchmarks were. So we already started the process of becoming more neutral at the beginning, going into this year, and we've maintained that position because, again, we keep going on both sides, right? Every 3 months, we're sort of shifting from one direction versus the other direction.
Well, I guess I would be, if you really believe that the federal government is going to behave themselves in a more responsible manner, you would extend it. But if you're somewhat
that.
skeptical,
Right.
you wouldn't. So I guess we all have our own opinions about that, but that's really the driving issue is how we can goose the returns just a bit by extending our at least at the moment extending, or I should say conversely the other way around, but. I think anybody who thinks that nirvana is going to occur anytime within our lifetime is probably somewhat naive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I would manage myself accordingly. But that's I'm talking about what my little savings account is doing, or if this were your money rather than the school boards. I realize you have to be very prudent.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think sooner or later, you have to kind of decide which side of this thing you really believe is what's really going to occur. It's all this studying the data and all that stuff is all very interesting, and it certainly is enlightening, but it's not fundamentally what drives the future.
Which is what, public policy?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, if you believe that $2 trillion could really come out of the federal government, I mean, we've been through this exercise quite a while. The Reconstruction Finance Administration was started in the Hoover administration, and we finally wound it down in the 50s. I mean, predated
We're back
the
to
New Deal.
Depression period.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
predated the New
Predated,
Deal, yeah.
okay.
Well, it was the Depression period, but it predated, so trying to wind these things down or restoring people's appetite for prudent behavior is an optimistic assessment, I would say. At any rate.
So you're doing the same thing, by the way, you're not doing anything.
Yeah, well, and, you know, we will see, right? So
Yeah,
right
well,
now,
indeed,
it's,
of course.
it's hope and speak, and, you know, we'll see as things go along, so.
But at any rate, y'all are doing a terrific job, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the erudite
Well, that's
statement.
Okay,
All right.
I'll take this back, and I'm going to open up the quarterly investment report that we do at the school district, and Kristen and Christy are the ones that prepare this. And this is very similar to what PFM does, is a different look, and we're looking at not just what they're investing, but also what we have in money markets and pools, and this is the entire thing. So it was, as of September 30th, it was $2 billion. About 2% in cash, 53% in money markets and pools, and 45% in securities. We do have tax revenues that are coming in right now. I'm working with PFM to get those invested, and we're going to be laddering those out, as we always do, based on when we think we need the cash. It has the benchmarks. It does show interest earnings so far is the dotted black lines. This year is ahead of where we were last year. I expect at some point that those are going to even out, and I think our total interest earnings for this coming year will probably be less than what it was last year. But we'll see how that goes. I mean, if they do continue to cut interest rates, of course, our interest earnings will be less. So I think it's higher now, but it's going to level off, and you'll see this quarterly as we move forward. This just shows and let's see if I can make that a little bigger. This just shows the different portfolios. So we have this is what we're managing in pools and securities. This is a short-term portfolio. And then this is the investment this is the total, this is the investment, this is the debt portfolio, this is the money that's held with the trustee. That's Bank of New York. So technically, the investment policy says we can not include the debt portfolio, but it's still money that we're managing, so I include it regardless, because I think it's important to monitor that. So this just shows where we're at based on the maturities, and this is the overall picture of how the money is invested. And this is the projections. Now, this is showing that we're going to have a lot in short-term investments coming up, and that I expect that is absolutely going to happen. So we'll see what this looks like, because right now you have a lot of projections in here. When we come in at the next meeting through December, it should look something more like what you see here. Hopefully, this is exactly what we end up doing. And then we have the list of all the securities, and I'm going to pass through that and go down to the sales tax report. This is as of September 30th. And we have since then received sales tax revenues for October and November. So the total receipts, if we look at this forecast, the 987, it would be the forecast for this period of time would be $1,008,418,000. Where we're actually at is $1.3 billion. So we're still under the trigger for sunsetting early, which is what we thought would happen. But it will certainly trigger for FY25. It will end a year early, which I've been saying that for almost a year now, and it's going to happen. Our current percentage is 129.68%. It spikes up with the money that came in November, that includes the quarterly catch-up payment. That quarterly catch-up payment, I had a long conversation with Department of Revenue. The other day, we were talking about the new tax and how it's being implemented, and I started talking about the quarterly catch-up payment because it's so much bigger than it used to be. And I thought it was based on small businesses, and she corrected me that that's not the case. The quarterly catch-up, the reason it's so large is because now we're accepting sales tax for items that are purchased from out of state. You know, that state law that changed, that if you're buying something out of state, but you live in Florida, the other state has to transmit that tax to us. And that's what the majority of that quarterly tax is. So I've said it a couple times that it was the small businesses, and that was not correct. So I wanted to share with you that quarterly tax is actually mostly coming from out-of-state sales. And that has, I mean, that's new, relatively new. It's been a couple of years while this tax came into place. But I think people are also doing a lot of purchases online, and they're buying things from all over the country, and it's being shipped in. And where you didn't have to pay tax on that before, now you do. So that's that quarterly. And it pops up every quarter. We average around 128%. In the month when we have a quarter, it jumps back up. So to give you an example, for the month, see the month, just looking at the month, it was 118%. For the money earned in July and received in September. It was 121% what we received in October. For November, with that quarterly amount, it's 214%. That quarterly payment is averaging $8 or $9 million. So it's a big chunk of money, and that was not included in our projections because we didn't know that was going to happen. There was no way to project that was going to happen. So that quarterly amount really does make a big difference in the sales tax. The expenditures to date, $769 million, and purchase orders in place, $144 million. There's a lot of contracts being issued, a lot of work being done. We're to the smaller projects. You know, all the big, giant projects funded with sales tax are done, or well underway. Now we're to the point where there's 60 schools that we still have to do, but they all have much smaller dollar values because the schools that needed the work the most happened first. We did the larger projects first. It's based on the needs of the schools. So now we're down to, they're working on Suncoast, for example, right now. And Suncoast, all they needed was the school to be painted and some work on the boiler. So it's smaller projects. It's the newer schools. That's what we're touching right now. So there's a lot of them, but smaller dollars. At the same time, costs have gone up. So, I mean, the painting is coming in double what we thought it was going to be. So it's interesting looking at all the dynamics that go into this. So and then we have the financing, the fees. That's not going to change again. That's the line of credit. That's the fees we paid associated with it, and it's done, and we're finished with it. So that's going to stay constant. But the interest earnings keep increasing. We're earning $2 to $3 million a month on interest earnings at this point. So the net transaction is $52 million. We have spent some of that. We used some of it to pay for the work being done at Roosevelt Full Service. At one point, we were very worried we were not going to have enough money in sales tax to finish everything on the list. So we picked projects that were large that would make sense to borrow for them, and the plan was to borrow for Roosevelt. And when we actually got to the point of doing the capital budget and start paying for the bills, I looked at the interest earnings and said, you know, we should use the interest earning to pay for the project and not borrow. So that was a change that happened with the capital plan this year. We flipped that back to sales tax, which is what it was intended to do. So that extra sales tax, the extra income from interest earnings will help us make sure we can finish every project on the list. So that covers I think that's the end. The rest of this is just copies of reports. Yes. Mhm. Right. Right. We did adjust the revenues for those in the capital plan, and right now we're showing it's got a slight increase. Is it like 3 or 4%, 5%, something like that? We're using the projections from EDR out of Tallahassee. They project what the property values will be. So it's certainly not double digits. It's come way down. So I think the capital plan, it varies between 4 and 5% going out 12 years. The state will give us projections going out 5. And then I lock in that last year and use that going out for the rest of it. So it is significantly less. And it will be interesting to watch. You keep hearing that property values are declining. You know, what is that going to look like? Most people have, that own a home, that actually live in Palm Beach County, I know I can tell you my property value is a lot higher than what's on my tax revenue. So the taxes will still go, that Save Our Homes, that 3% increase, we'll still see those increase annually. But the people that are not homesteaded, we may see some of that drop. And I'm curious to see what happens in Palm Beach County. You keep hearing that there's a lot of people buying homes right now because of the president and his home, and you see lots of activity of people still moving here. So I'm not sure if Palm Beach County is going to see a decline in property values or not. I mean, we'll see what happens.
And I think it was 13% increase last year in the ad valorem tax.
I think it was, but we're not expecting that to happen. Was it, or was it lower?
Well, for this year, and I think you're also comparing us to the county, so we as a district are not subject to the 10% cap that the county is. So our increase this year, I believe, is around, I think it's going to be around 7%, whereas the county's projected increase is higher than ours. I think they're at 9+%. But ours normally is higher than the county. But now, since it's almost like a true-up because we're not subject to that 10% cap in the increase in the property values, that the county had more room to move on their side in terms of the increase in the property values this current year. So you are going to see a difference that our projected increase in the property values is less than the county for this upcoming fiscal year, this current fiscal year.
I'll check it.
Yeah, they are different. Sherry Brown from Palm Beach County, and we compare what our rates are, what the increases are. It was higher than projected this past year, but it's going to slow down, and we factored that into the budget. Are there any questions on the investment reports? Okay.
We've had are very relevant. Ones we've had are very relevant.
So the next item on the agenda, I want to take a look at the investment policy. And I've added, you all have seen this investment policy. We've gone over it many times. The school board and the superintendent have requested that we do a very thorough review of all of our policies. And there's actually a backlog of getting them to the board. So I squeezed in one more change that I want to make before this goes to the board. And I think it's on page 18, and it has to do with performance. Let's see if I can find it here. It should pop up, yeah. Did I go past it? Performance measures. Okay, so what we have right now, we have 2 portfolios. We have the short-term portfolio and the core. The core portfolio is what PFM manages. That is got an index of the Bank of America Merrill Lynch 1 to 3 year government index. I don't want to make any changes there. What I want to do is the short term. I want to break it into 2 pools. I want to have one that's strictly overnight and one that is considered short term. So what we had was one pool, and it was the benchmark was the S&P rated GIP index, which is the local government investment pool index. So it's a short-term index. Those dollars are all invested, typically no more than 60 days, an average of 45 days right now, 30 to 45 days. And that was very helpful in a normal yield curve environment. And what I've realized is that short-term rate is a lot higher than the 1 year or 2 year, at least right now. And that highlighted an issue to me. I don't want my short-term portfolio that is a 12-month gauged against basically an overnight rate. In a normal environment, that makes sense because the overnight rate is a lot less than the 2-month or 3-month. But that hasn't been the case in the past year with an inverted yield curve. So technically, I could leave it the way it is, and when the yield curve normalizes, it's going to make us look really good. But I think it needs to be broken out, and we're tracking those separately. So the overnight, which is, I'm saying bank balances, money markets, and pools, that should be checked with a benchmark of a local government investment pool rate. And everything else should be something longer. And I turned to PFM, and they did a review of our short-term portfolio. And I don't know how far back Mr. Sims went, but he went back and looked at what the average was and said that a good benchmark for that would really be the 3-month T-bill index. It's a more accurate reflection of what we're doing. I mean, typically when we're doing investments in December, it's going to be 4 months out to 12 months typically. But as you move along in the year, that shrinks. So the average over the course of time is 3 months. So I want to break it out and have an extra benchmark so that, and it works on total return as opposed to just a flat interest rate. So I think that's a better representation of what we should be matching our performance against. So I'm just adding an extra benchmark in. We'll have to adjust our reporting. It won't impact PFM other than you'll have a new benchmark to report against. But on the report we do, we'll have 3 portfolios. We'll have an overnight, a short term, and then the core. And really the overnight is the money that we keep in, again, money market bank accounts and pools. It's the money that we use to make payroll over the next 2 months. I'm not investing out 4 months there. Does that make sense? I think it's the right thing to do. I would need a vote.
Well, before you do that, I'd like further explanation. Do you all understand that? I certainly don't.
Well,
What, are you changing the
What I'm-
3-month,
What I'm doing is adding another level in. Instead of having just short-term and long-term and the core, I'm adding in basically an overnight pool.
so that comes out of the
Yes.
other one? And what do you use for that?
The overnight rate is going to be the local government index. It's the pool. It's the rate of a money market or
Much
pool.
longer, that's a much longer.
Well, I'm investing in money markets and pools. So the investments I'm doing are money markets and pools and a little bit in bank accounts, but we don't keep a lot in the bank. So it's really investing in money markets and pools, and I'm going to compare that against an index of money markets and pools of what that rate should be. So I think that's a good benchmark for that, for those short-term, ultra short-term funds. And then for the other, what we're going to call a short-term and pool, that's money that we're
This
typically.
is more than one day.
Yes,
More than
it's
overnight.
more 4 months to 12 months, but the average over an average year is about 3 months. So I'm using a 3-month T-bill rate. And that's the recommendation from PFM. I called Richard and said, this is what I think we need to do, and he agreed with me. I was glad. I always try to check that to make sure that what I'm thinking makes sense, and
And you used to use,
we use the pool, the S&P local government investment pool rate was used for all of it, for the short,
but you're no longer using it at all.
No, I'm going to use it
Oh, you're
just
gonna
for the
use it
money
for the
markets.
money market only.
Right. And I'm adding a different benchmark. Instead of using that local government and pool rate, I want to use a 3-month rate for the short term, which has an average life of 3 years over the course, 3 months over the course of the year. I'm trying to match the benchmark to the life of the securities.
Sounds fine.
Sound okay? Jack?
Because it's Leanne and Richard, I will vote to approve. What I would have liked to see was the analysis that you did.
Okay.
And I mean, it seems to me it'd be a straightforward, here's the old index, here's the new index,
Right.
and see how the new one is better than the old one.
That,
Have
we
you
can
done
bring
that?
back.
Probably done
Maybe
that.
next time we see you, well, you must have done something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we
maybe
did.
maybe next time we see you, you'll show us that.
Right, we'll bring that back so you can see it. It's, I mean, this came it was my idea to start with because I'm looking at a current yield of 5%, and my 2-month, 3-month are earning 2 and 3%. And it's because of the inverted yield curve. This never would have come to mind if we didn't have the inverted yield curve. But now I'm looking at it and saying we should have a different rate for overnight securities versus the things that go out longer. So,
You explained it conceptually perfectly. Every so often, I like to see the numbers.
we're happy to bring that back.
Good job. Thank you.
We'll bring it back at the next meeting. I'd like to get the committee's approval on this, but it's not going to get to the school board for approval before our next meeting. So if we bring it back, the next meeting, I think, is March 7th. We'll get to that in a minute. Whatever that, I think it's March 7th. We can bring it back at that time, and if the numbers don't make sense to you and you want to switch it back, we can do that, because we can make the change before it actually gets to the board.
Okay, well then why don't we have a motion to approve this subject to further review?
I'm sorry, I
of
didn't
the-
think to bring that, and
of
we
the
should have.
backup.
We did the work and
the
did
work,
bring
right.
it in, so,
We'll
sorry
show the
about
work.
that. We'll
Which-
bring it at the next meeting.
Okay, so let's, is that okay for a motion for you all?
Fine.
Have a motion?
Fine.
Jack?
Second?
Okay,
Okay,
so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right,
okay, so thank
motion
you.
passes, thanks, Bill.
Yeah. I think it's-
The next two things, this probably could have gone on discussion, the first one, but I think I need a vote on this. We did go ahead, at the last meeting, I mentioned that we were negotiating new contracts with PFM Asset Management and PFM Financial Advisors. Their contracts are expiring. What we ended up doing, the investment advisor contract actually had the ability to extend the contract for another 5 years. So that's what we're doing, is just extending the contract.
With
With
PFM?
PFM Asset Management. PFM Financial Advisors, we did do a new contract. The language for the contract is essentially the same. We made very minor tweaks based on statutory changes, but the language is exactly the same. The fees did go up a little bit. Percentage-wise, it looks big, but it's a very small dollar amount. It went from 18,000 a year to, for whatever we want, to, I think it's 25,000 a year. Percentage-wise, it's a big dollar amount, but that dollar amount, that increase is not that significant when you think of all the things they do and how costs have gone up. What they
That's
did,
the actual dollar that will be paid out.
right, and that price is based on an RFP that was done at another school district that is comparable to us. So that was one of the
Which one?
reasons. It was Broward Schools.
Broward.
So they did an RFP, and we're using the pricing that came from that. So it's a slight increase in fees.
Sounds like a good deal either way, but this is PFM, our financial advisor.
Yes, I think it's, I think they do it.
So those will be going to the board. The investment advisor is going to the board in December. The financial advisor is going to the board in January. So I wanted to make sure that I advised the committee on what we had done, because when I go to the board, I say that you all have reviewed it and you're in agreement that that's what we should do. So
So that's for PFM.
that's the two PFM, and they're two separate companies now. So it's PFM Asset Management and PFM Financial Advisors. But it's the people that you're used to seeing.
Okay, and that dollar figure you gave us, the dollar figure is for which one or for both?
The dollar amount, the fees for the investment advisor did not change. We just extended the contract. The increase that we had is for the financial advisor.
I see. Okay. All right,
Yes, that sounds fine. to me.
Jack, you have a second? All righty, so all in favor?
For a matter of interest, is both of these two entities owned by a common parent?
No.
Oh, they are
PFM
totally-
Financial Advisor is owned by, is PFM. PFM Asset Management was sold to U.S. Bank, so they're now a wholly owned subsidiary of U.S. Bank. Did I say that correctly? The wholly owned
U.S.
subsidiary?
Bank?
U.S.
US
Bank.
Bank.
Okay,
Okay,
fine.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None, the motion passes.
Okay, and then the last two are just contract updates. At some point, I'll bring these to you. Actually, March 7th, I'll be bringing the underwriters back. The underwriters, we're doing an invitation to negotiate, and that's going out in the street in January. So that's why we have underwriters here and on the phone. I'm not going to say anything about it. It's going out in January, and it'll be on the street for a month, and then we'll be doing a scoring, and we'll have the results back to bring to you at the March 7th the next Finance Committee.
Is it the same format that we've used for
Yes.
reaching to the underwriters
Just as
before?
a general observation, it seems to me that significant amount of emphasis should be put on firms that are really actually providing ongoing, I know you have a financial advisor, but if you have all these large firms and they're circling around, we need for them to have a continuing source of information and advice. Whether you follow it or not is another thing, but the level of ongoing service should be given a considerable amount of weight. Those people who show up and who've been around, who claim they have some knowledge, but appear when an RFP comes around, should be given short shift. I'm serious. I mean, it's
I
really
understand.
true.
The reason I'm
And I think
smiling-
frankly, that the staff, you being the foremost person in that respect, should have a significant say in who gets picked. And having people in there for various reasons that have nothing to do with their significant professional skills should be given very little time and attention, and not participate in the underwriting group.
The reason I was smiling is my email has been flooded with proposals that are coming in right now. There's a lot of
Oh,
email.
yeah, well, everybody sniffs around and, yeah, I know, I mean,
Well-
I was in the business, I know all about it, all right?
Well, and I can give the committee a heads up. We do have a number of securities with call dates in 2015 that are subject to refunding coming up in the next year. We probably will have a refunding issue that'll come to the committee. We're already lining up PF Laura Howe, if she's still on the phone. They're already running numbers and working on it. So there will be a refunding issue that will probably come to you. I'm not sure if it'll be in the it probably will be at the March meeting that will bring that in. So there's, and I can't, the emails haven't been coming, they are coming in very quickly right now, but it's been consistent over the last year. There's a group of firms that are very good about keeping us up to date of what's going on in the market.
Well,
and
they should be
options.
rewarded for that.
I agree.
Good.
Now, of course, we've got one that dropped out altogether. Who is leading the group now, since city is out?
I don't know who had the highest ratings. You got a bunch of them in the room. They could probably tell me who the highest ranked one is right now.
The highest what?
Well, I thought we had one that was leading the pack, and that was not just in terms of rating, but in managing.
Had three senior, in the current pool,
Yeah,
we had three seniors, and it was Citibank, Bank of America, and JP Morgan. Were
Okay.
the three seniors in our pool.
okay. And so Citibank is out of that.
Bank is out. They're no longer participating in the market, so it's Bank of America and JP Morgan are the current seniors in our pool.
I see.
And that's another reason. I mean, the fact that the contract it actually has expired. We let it expire because I didn't have any transactions, and we were lining up the process of when we were going to need to do a transaction. So we're working on that RFP. It's about done. It's in final review. I'm actually working with legal. We want to make sure we have the sample contract in the document. So it's been written. Laura Howe from PFM helped us and put some language in there based on current market conditions. So we do have that about finished, and it will be going out in January. Okay, the other one
And I am
is,
still here, and did just want to say it would be March that we would come back and bring the potential refundings to the committee for review.
yeah, Laura, we're working on dates to go to the board. So I'll talk to you separately on that, because the contract for the underwriters would need to go to the board, as would the COPS issue, the refunding. It would go to the school board and the leasing corp. So we're lining up dates to get those scheduled, but it would come to the finance committee March 7th. The other contract that we're working on right now, our bond counsel and disclosure counsel, those contracts are up, and we would like to just negotiate contracts with them. I'm working with general counsel's office. They've concurred that we should just do updated contracts with both Greenberg Traurig and Neighbors Giblin Nickerson. They've done great work for us, and they're very familiar with what goes on. They're the leads in the state for this type of work, and we'd like to continue working with them. So unless the committee tells me otherwise, we're going to go ahead and negotiate that, and I'll bring it back to you before it goes to the school board.
Prices, how do you deal with it? You give them a set price?
We haven't gone there yet. We're just
Yeah.
getting started on that.
No
That's
bid.
part of the negotiation. I'll go to them and say, can we just keep it at the same? And they're going to come back and want something different, and we'll negotiate what the rate should be. So I don't know the answer to that yet.
Can PFM help you compare? How do you compare what the market is and what they're offering?
Well, usually what I do, I reach out to other school districts throughout the state that work with the other firms and say, what do your current contracts look like? But if you look at a current contract that was issued 4 years ago, that is different than a contract that was issued a year ago, because there are costs that have just gone up, and we saw the inflation numbers. I mean, there really is increased cost. I try to keep them level. Let's not make any changes. That's what I'll shoot for, but chances are it's going to go up some.
Okay.
But I don't know what the rates are. I'll be bringing that back to the committee. Right now, this is really for discussion. Let me know if you have concerns, and I'll be coming back to you.
Leanne, I think you have 3 new board members.
We
on the
do.
School board. Do you do any kind of, I'll say, help them understand what all we do? Or you
Yes.
do, I should say.
Well, I know we're doing a, can't think of the word, and
Onboarding. So
Onboarding.
we are doing an onboarding with the 3 new board members, and the superintendent was previously the CFO. So
Okay.
he's able to educate the board members on the importance of the committee, the reason that you have the expertise, and you're there to support them.
Well, I know the county went through this last election. They got 3 new people in. There was a little bit of uproar about some of the things that were done, and I say, kind of out of left field, and just so you don't get hit by that.
Right.
Okay,
well, the annual investment and debt reports are going to the board in December.
yeah.
Again, that's one of the reasons I printed hard copies, because there are some new school board members, and you may get a phone call. And I wanted to make sure you had a copy of that you had it, instead of having to find it online. The onboarding process is getting the board members up to speed to help them understand all the things that go on. I don't know if they're planning, there is a FSBA, which is the Florida School Board Association, offers, I know they had a meeting this week, and they do an onboarding for new school board members across the state. They also offer training for finance. They do a Finance 101, and I'm one of the people that do that course. It's happening in February, and we did it for the last 2-year cycle of school board members. I had 3 2-day trainings with new school board members from across the state. So I don't know if our school board members will choose to do that. I do it with 2 other finance officers. It's the CFO from Lake Schools, and then it was a CFO from St. John's. She's retired. I think it's going to be somebody from Sarasota that fills her spot. And we all talk about the things that we know the best. So I'm talking about investments in debt and the capital budget and committees. And when I did that, a lot of the school board members are from small districts. You know, we're one of the largest in the state, but a lot of the districts are much smaller. And there was a lot of discussion about our committees. And I spent a lot of time talking about the finance committee and what you do. And I ran into some of the school board members at a meeting earlier this week, and they said, you know, we tried to do a finance committee like you have, but we're a very small district and we couldn't find people with the expertise. And one of them actually pulled me aside, we're watching your finance committees now, because these are all on YouTube. So these school board members from other parts of the state are now watching our finance committee.
Good, so we do have an audience.
They watch it after the fact, but they do, they see it. So we'll find a way and make sure they do know all the work that you all do. I mean, that's one of the reasons on that annual report at the very beginning, I say and commend this finance committee for all the work that you all do. We could not have done all the transactions we've done over the years without having this committee with all your expertise. I mean, there have been times where we propose something and you'll say, no, we shouldn't do it that way. We need to do something else. And I can't promise we will always do what you recommend, but I think I always have, because you've got so much expertise, we want to take advantage of that. So we
Well,
certainly
we feel
value
the same
work.
way, frankly.
Yeah.
You're terrific
That's right.
finance folks. Really.
Precisely.
You do a great job.
We
That's the
really
reason I
appreciate having you.
suggested you have more authority, as it were, or a bigger ballot than anybody else in picking the underwriters, because fundamentally we want people who are actually in the business in a major way and have a commitment to it and are going to continue to be of service between issuance, not show up
Right.
for the closing dinner.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that the way we've adjusted the solicitation counts for that. I'm really hoping we've got that in there, because there are limits. They can't give me a bigger vote. That's not allowed in statute. I'm not allowed to do that.
Okay.
But the way we write and the questions we ask hopefully will facilitate that in the proposals. Okay, so that is all I had on the agenda. I just want to, again, thank the committee for all the work that you do and all the expertise and knowledge that you share with us. We really could not do what we do without you.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
Christmas
Yes, indeed. Yes,
meal. Breakfast was beautiful.
I'll get up earlier next year.
Yep,
I
I
think
do
we're
have the
all-
dates.
So I get my fair share.
The dates for the next meetings, it is March 7th, I remembered correctly, so there's the other dates. I'll send out calendar invites later today, so you have them on your calendar. I took out, we used to have 2 extra ones in there that we always ended up canceling. I just took them out, so we have the 4 quarterly meetings. And these align nicely with, we've had some times where my dates are too tight to the end of the quarter and puts a lot of pressure on PFM to get us all the reports. I think I've got these in a nice range for you, Richard. So hopefully we can stick with these dates this year and don't have any changes or cancellations. So I'll send these out to you this afternoon.
Super. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
And a second from Paul? All right, we're adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leanne.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, Doug, good to see you.